So we have just installed Alibre. We've opened the part modeling environment. And right before we start modeling, we want to make some setups. Are we running the right dimensions? Do we want to fine tune the appearance? Do we want to make sure that we're saving in the right ways? Well, let's talk about setting up Alibre in this video. First, I've got this gear icon, and that takes me to my system options, specifically for the design tree. Now, I also can say File and System Options here on the bottom. And under these workspaces, right, I have General, and you can see here that we are divided amongst several areas. We have all workspaces, and all that falls under this are settings that will affect all workspaces, whether in making parts, making assemblies, making drawings. These are somewhat universal settings that affect all workspaces. Then you have settings that are specific for just parts and assemblies, settings that only apply to drawings, settings that apply to parts that are made outside of Alibre, like solid part files, step files, IGES, and all of that. Certain recovery settings, and settings about the display and colors in Alibre. Let's start with all workspaces. Under General, of course, we can select our language. And if you are running the Alibre PDM software, then we have the options to save files to the Windows local file system, or your PDM, or the Vault. When we have hints down here, right, we have certain cursor hints that we can have, and show pop-up on errors. I'll select show pop-up on errors, which will probably be selected by default for you. We'll say OK. So when I have my cursor hints, I can hover my cursor over something and receive hints on what that tool does and how to use it. Likewise, if I go make a sketch on a plane, and then I go to extrude it, I get an error because my sketch is incorrectly unclosed. And so I get this pop-up warning right here that tells me that I've made a mistake. Now I can uncheck that box if I wish, and then I won't see those boxes anymore. So that setting can be toggled on or off under All Workspaces, General, Show Pop-up on Errors. Under Sketching, we have a simple Show Sketching in Place editing menu. And what that is, if I go to edit my sketch and I click somewhere that is blank, this menu shows up and I can say add another part of my sketch. So we'll deactivate that sketch. And going back into settings, for keyboard shortcuts, you can make whatever keyboard shortcuts you like. Now, I'll share some of mine. Under Part Editor, for Sketch, if I scroll to the bottom, I might say symmetric would be the S key, and to add some of these, I simply click in the box and then type the key that I would like to have. So tangent might be T, a vertical constraint might be V, a horizontal constraint might be H, a dimension might be D, right? So now when I get into the sketching environment, since I applied these sketching hotkeys, instead of coming all the way up here and clicking dimension and then going back, I can hit D with my left hand as I use my mouse, and the D key is right there. Maybe I want that to be vertical. I'll click it and use the V key. Likewise, I can hit the H key to make something horizontal, and so on. So we can sketch, I would say, substantially faster just by having the hotkeys mapped to things that you would find useful. So we'll deactivate the sketch. And going back into settings, data folders is a great thing to leave to defaults unless you're in a special situation. It just leaves our thread files and toolbox directories right where the system needs to use them. Now under parts and assemblies, you can adjust the appearance of your planes. I kind of like the shaded planes. You can also show an arrow which shows your plane normal if you'd like to use that. You can adjust your plane sizes to the feature that they reference or leave them consistent with all the other planes. And you can change how you shade your part. Now, all CAD uses boundary representations, or it approximates curvature by a whole bunch of small straight things to look curved, and shading can help enhance the visual qualities of being smooth when it needs to be smooth. But because just graphics approximate straight things as curvature, you can also use the shading to show these straight, flat surfaces. It's important to note that despite the model, if it appears this way, it actually does represent something that is perfectly round, right? We're just talking about graphical approximations here, not the actual shape that you'd be looking at. Next, I kind of like 2 lights, but you can compare the pictures and experiment with the number of lights that you would like. And then we can animate parts going into place, or we can simply snap them right into place depending on how you would like. So, for instance, I will extrude my sketch, and then when I click, you can see the animation of the part turning. If I go into Design Viewing and turn that off, you may observe that I still have the animation, but I don't have the animation when I click up here. So that's the difference that we can see. I turn this back on. I do like the animation, but that's just personal preference. And now we're animated as we change our views. Going back to our views, I might have missed design tree here. We have the options to choose like small elements in our design tree, medium or large, and of course I like medium. We also can edit the content of our design tree. So we have these places for edges, surfaces, faces, vertices, etc. And I can highlight individual edges in my part. Likewise with faces and vertices. But let's say that I have a workflow where I feel like I don't want to reference these elements in my design tree, and in fact I feel like they might take up too much space. Well, we have settings for that. So we go into the design tree and we can uncheck the things that we don't wish to have, and we say OK, and now they're gone. Now with sketching, we also can adjust the appearance of our sketches, right? What are the size of our constraints that we're looking for? What are the sizes of our nodes? And we have a sketch grid. So right now I am displaying a 10-inch by 10-inch grid. Now you may want to work in millimeters or something like that. Well, stay tuned and we'll cover how to change your units. As of right now, maybe this is too big. Just to demonstrate, I'll open my sketch. And you can see this relatively large grid. Now when I go to sketching here, we're going to call this, say, 1 by 1 by 1. And now we have a much more densely populated grid. And we can see that every one of these is an inch, which can really help because I think scale is easy to get lost in with CAD, and having a grid can really help you maintain scale. And then 3D previews, I just like to leave both of these on, but of course these are real-time 3D feature previews. So if I turn off a 3D feature preview, exit my sketch, create a new sketch for a 3D feature, and I go to extrude, well, you can see there's no feature preview apart from just these blue lines. I like to have the 3D feature previews on. So when I turn on to show previews and I extrude the same sketch, I can see this yellow preview that shows up. Going back into settings now. Here we have 2D drawing unique settings. All of these settings I suggest to remain default, and you can adjust some of the same sketch settings that you've had in the sketching menu here. just make them look different in drawings, as your sketches and drawings may have different needs or functions as your part sketches. Finally, if you're unhappy with the way that your PDF was written, you can change to Alibre's built-in PDF writer or have a different active PDF writer. For interoperability, you have several settings to import parts. I suggest checking heal and make tolerant and heal and make tolerant for all of your imported parts, which is what general is for. You have other things like discard non-solid faces, override units. They're all pretty self-explanatory. And you have some specific format settings like settings for IGES, STL, and STEP. And then under recovery, I like to save documents every minute. That is quite frequent. And then I think the default is 20 minutes so that if something happens and you lose a bunch of data, you'll hopefully only lose a maximum of 20 minutes of work. But I like to keep my parts pretty close. It's often I like to ask a lot of Alibre when I use it. So I play it safe for the parts, but you can change your saving and recovery settings to fit what suits you. Now, we can go into display, and these are some of the funnest settings that I have. Under general, we have the ability to select what graphics display device that we are using. And I do recommend leaving all of these on default, but you can change a lot of your overall display. For instance, maybe I don't want to use the ribbon, and just like that, the ribbon is gone. But fortunately, we can always recover that by going back into general and actually using the ribbon. We may also wish to work with our color scheme. So we have some options here for color scheme. And we always have our default colors, right? This is a default appearance for Alibre. Or we can create our own custom color scheme. By clicking the New button, we can give it a name. And we can base it on any of our previous schemes. We'll base it on our default. And from here, we have certain categories. Maybe I want the top of my graphics display background to be more of a dark gray. And when I say OK, that is updated. Likewise, coming down here to color scheme, we have many different fields that we can show. But these are just, of course, general parts of our categories where our dimension color may want to change from black to something else. We also can change, say, our references. So I may want to say that my planes, instead of green, would be a nice light blue. And when I say OK, you can see that my planes change into a nice light blue. So we can change just about all of the colors that we interact with in Alibre from that color scheme menu. And as always, if I wish to not have my new custom scheme anymore, I can simply hit delete. One useful thing to have is maybe a screen capture background where I made mine all pink. So I can screenshot a part in Alibre and then set a photo editor to clip out all of the pink colors and leave the rest so I can have easily transparent images. One possible use of many for the various color scheme settings that we have. You may wish to have a dark theme as well if you're looking to change the color of your ribbon and design tree. We have these various settings, some of which are designed to be friendly for color blindness. So you can select a certain kind of color blindness, or we can simply go to dark mode or even blue, right? Blue will put some light blue colors on the tree. But I also really enjoy dark mode, and I'm excited to say that in version 28 and beyond, the tree will darken with the ribbon. Now we have other sets of settings as well. We have covered global settings that apply to Alibre, right? So when you open up a part and you set your color scheme, say to a custom dark theme like this, then Alibre will open like this every time. But we also have properties, and properties apply to individual parts. So we'll go to File, Properties, And these are the properties for the file that we are working with that will be unique to the file. Under General, we can assign a part number, right? Maybe that's the part number I wish to have associated with my part, and I can also provide a description. And I can provide a version comment. Under Saving, this is one of my favorite things to do. Let's say that we are revising a part and we wish to make sure that it is read-only so people don't accidentally change it and alter records in the future. We can make this locked, and when I apply that, we can save and lock, right? We're saving it for last time. And now, the Save button is disabled. And I can't edit, right? I have no editing tools. So we've created a read-only part. Again, extremely useful when we make revisions and versions if we want to keep records on our parts without the worry that we'll accidentally save. We always can disable this by going back to Properties, Saving, and we can also make a notification. So every time that we go to save the part, we receive a notification. Maybe I'll make a change here and create a sketch. What the notification behavior will do is when I go to save, it will tell me that downstream files that use this file will need to be updated after we save. Right? This is just typical stuff when you have assemblies that reference files. We'll save and version. Now we also can adjust our save settings just from the File menu, from Notify to Normal. Now if we go back to Properties, under Part Data, we have a number of metadata categories that we can update as needed. So created by, created date, right? These are all metadata values that can travel with the part should we want to have them. We also have 3D previews, right? So if I can set them to be no 3D preview and apply. And if I go back to my 3D sketch, if I close it up, I think I said 3D sketch there. Of course, I'm at 2D sketch. My 3D preview doesn't really exist apart from these blue lines. When I go back to my part properties under 3D previews, if I show my 3D previews for this file, then when I go to edit my extrusion, you can see I have this yellow preview. This can be helpful when adding fillets or lofting as well. So if your fillets are too slow, or if you're unhappy with how fillets work, sometimes adjusting 3D previews can get you what you need. But I always prefer to have 3D previews on. Again, back to System Properties. This is where we set our units. Right now I'm on inches, but I can make it millimeters, centimeters, meters, feet, and feet in inches. We also can do fractional inches if you are working with those kinds of standards. I think most applications require decimals, but if you're in construction or something like that, fractions may be relevant. We have zero suppression, which mostly correlates with ISO and ANSI standards. Right? Inches, you prefer to suppress your leading zeros. Millimeters, you prefer to suppress your trailing zeros. You have your mass units, right? Do you prefer grams, kilograms, pounds? Angles, you can choose degrees, degrees in minutes, degrees, minute, and second, and even radians. You also can adjust your symbols, like diameter, right? Radius, through, min, max. You can adjust all these things. And you may be asking, okay, but you just said that all of these settings apply to the specific file. And we went through all the settings that apply to all parts. So how do I change my default settings for all parts? And that would be selecting this box here. When we check this box, these settings get applied as default for all parts, sheet metal, and assemblies. Finally, we have dual dimensions. So we can add show dual dimensions, and then we have millimeters with custom zero suppression settings, the precision that you'd like, right? So if I apply that and I go back into my sketch, now when I apply my dimension, I have both inches and millimeters shown. This is great, especially if you're dealing with something like wheels, which have standards for both millimeters and inches sometimes, or if you're dealing with a customer or a supplier that needs units different than yours. Also, going back into our system properties, or I should say our part properties, would be have certain material properties. We can have our hatches. So certain materials may require certain hatch patterns, and we can adjust those as needed. This is especially useful when we transition to a drawing. You'll know that you'll have the correct hatch. You can also have your custom densities for your parts, again with your selected units. Now, I don't have a material set right now. If we wish to set our material, that's actually done in the tree here, or we can even click here for a material library, and I can set any material that I would like. Perhaps I'll be modeling, I'm feeling kind of rich. Maybe we'll model with gold. And now, when I go into File and Properties, select Material, and now my material is recognized with its density that I can adjust as needed and adjust any hatching patterns that I may need. Now when we go to Display, I try to have the best looking videos that I can get you. So I have things generally for the best looking. But if you have any difficulties with appearance, right? Maybe you import a part and the imported part doesn't show up properly. Sometimes adjusting some of these settings can help. We also can add certain visual styles to our graphics display. Right now, I have a nice reflection and a shadow on the ground and things like that. So that is a complete look at what the settings are when we first start using Alibre and getting it to behave exactly as you would like. Hope this video was helpful, and thank you for watching.